to the pigeon tutorial. So I'm going to give you a few different examples of how you can practice pigeon pose and the different variations you can take within it. We'll begin with a standing pigeon or a figure 4. It's a version or a different variation from chair pose. So you would have this exact same posture in chair pose. Feet are hip bone distance apart, belly is pulling in, chest is lifted, tailbone is down. So you're being very careful not to arch the spine here. Spine is neutral, tailbone down. Make sure you can see your toes. If you can't see the toes, then pull the hips back further. Press it into one foot. Bring the opposite outside of the ankle over your standing thigh, avoiding the knee. Flex that left foot, and here you are. You can either stay here or come forward, bringing your elbows towards that shin. So that's the first variation. We're actually going to move down with each different variation. The next one, you can take seated. So these are different options anytime that the last option doesn't feel good for you. You bring the outside of the ankle over your thigh again, avoiding the knee, and flex the foot that's up here, the one that I'm wiggling. Flex that foot. So here you are seated. For less intensity, walk the foot that's on the ground further away from you. For more intensity, you can bring it further up. Try to keep the spine long. And I always encourage wiggling and shaking, but very mindfully. So nothing is too quick or jagged movements. Everything is very thoughtful and gentle. And this will help open the hips. From here, seated, so you can also do this in a chair. If you're seated in a chair, just sitting like this and leaning forward, that's a pigeon pose. That's a really good one to practice at your desk. So moving even more down, you can find right here, same thing, bringing the outside of that ankle over your thigh, not pressing on the knee, flexing the foot. That will help it keep engaged from falling asleep or going numb or tingling. And from here, you can thread your hand in between your thighs, or onto the back of the thigh. If that's not accessible, you can just grab onto the outside of the legs, or you can even grab on to the shin that's away from you. From here, think about pressing that left knee away from you. If you actually want to put a little bit of pressure on it to push it away, you can put it on the thigh. So again, avoid the knee, and then you pull it here. If that feels pretty good, you can also lengthen that bottom hamstring. Flexing the feet keeps the stretch in the hamstring and protects the front of the leg. If you were to point, that would stretch more of the front of the leg and protect the hamstring. But here we're in a pigeon, you're really focusing on the outer hip. So the last variation is the most typical one that you'll see in a practice, is like this. So this is the variation. I'm going to give you a few options within this. So you ideally would like the front shin to be parallel to the top of the mat. Well, that's not really accessible for everybody. So a lot of times when you do that, this hip starts to pop up, and then you lose the stretch over here. So you can pull this foot closer towards your hip bone, and then you're able to sit up a little higher. If you're up here in your stretch, if your hips aren't opening enough, you can put a blanket underneath that, in my case, the right leg, so that you're a little resting down and you can relax a little bit. You can do that, or you can even bend the back knee. So this is a deer pose. This is a yin pose, deer. And so then you would turn away from that leg and then bend forward. So it's almost like a little twist. But whenever you find your variation for this pigeon, if the back leg is straight, if it's not bent in your deer, you would look back to your back leg and make sure that the toes are straight. A lot of times we pigeon toes, the toes turn inward. We just want a pigeon leg, not a pigeon toe. And so you'll straighten the back toes and the back leg in line with this hip bone. This knee comes in line with the front hip bone. And here you are. I like to lengthen first and then lower down. You can lower down as much as you want. If you have a pillow, you can hug the pillow here. If you have a blanket, you can even roll that under. You can come onto your forearms or roll all the way down and then stay here for several breaths. I say at least 10 breaths as you move into deep hip opening. You can bring up a lot of emotions, a lot of thoughts, and even trauma. So you just want to breathe through that, stay very present with it, and then let it pass, just like we do with the rest of our practice. So another variation from your pigeon pose is if you want to sit upright, you can take a back bend for king pigeon. So you would bend that back foot in and grab a hold of your foot. If you have a strap, you can place the strap on your foot. And maybe grab with both hands. So here's another version. You can take a lot of different variations on here, including mermaid. Turn it to the side and look over towards that back foot. You can pull this right foot even closer to your hip and take this variation where find a little bind. You can take any of those variations for pigeon. So with your pigeon pose, traditionally we do take one that I just demonstrated, like this on the mat and leaning forward. But again, a lot of times that doesn't work for everybody's hips. So you can take the seated pigeon, or you can come on your back and take that version. It takes a little less pressure off the hip, but you still get all the benefits of the hip opening, all the benefits of the stretch of the outer hip, and moves into the glute. And of course, all the emotional releasing that goes along with that. So strengthen, stretch, open, and breathe with the hips. Thank you so much for practicing, and remember to take 5 to 10 breaths at least with each version that you take. Thank you.